Welcome to the Why on Earth Communities Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series. Today I am here visiting with Bethany Yarrow. Hi, Bethany.
Hello, Aaron.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Doing well. So happy to be here with you. And we're here in your home at the Waterfall House in central New York.
Yes.
Sitting by a very nice, warm, cozy fire. And it's just wonderful.
Fireside chat is the best kind.
Fireside chat. Yeah, so let me just share with our audience a little about you and your background.
Oh, go for it.
So Bethany Yarrow sings music of power and praise. She is a songkeeper, earth activist, and student of the spiritual traditions of the Americas. On stage, she is a mesmerizing dancing spirit with a soulful voice and a living prayer for unity at the heart of her music. Bethany has been involved in many social justice, environmental justice, and human rights issues throughout her life. In her role as a musician activist, she often finds herself in the streets playing at demonstrations, rallies, and concerts for change. Bethany has worked on Native, non-Native alliance building for over a decade, was one of the founding organizers of the Black Hills Unity Concert, as well as the Waterfall Unity Alliance, which was formed to stop pipelines and fossil fuel infrastructure expansion in New York and to transition to earth-based models of community power. She is also a member of the advisory board of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary. As the daughter of Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary, Bethany carries a legacy of music and activism across the generations. The first time she was arrested was with her dad in 1986 when she was 14, protesting apartheid and singing "We Shall Overcome" in front of the South African Embassy. Musically, Bethany is best known as one half of the dynamic duo Bethany and Rufus that she formed with groundbreaking cellist Rufus Cappadocia in 2001. Although Bethany put filmmaking aside many years ago, she revisited her cinematic roots to help with the filming of the feature documentary The Grandmothers Speak for the Next 7 Generations, a film about the Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. So Bethany, thanks for welcoming me to your home and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited to dive in. We've got a lot to talk about, and I can't help but asking, you don't often introduce somebody by saying the first time she got arrested, right? So maybe you could share a little with us about that part of your background and the work you've been doing.
In terms of being an arrestable?
Yeah, being arrestable in terms of your activism.
Well, I clearly grew up with a sense of urgency around change, human rights, enormous agency of, for my dad, I guess it was his ethical, cultural Jewish roots of tikkun olam, of, it's not up to me to change the whole world, but it's up to me to do my part in what I can do. So I've always been very aware of privilege, and how to use any measure of privilege that you can as a lever for positive social change. And privilege really meaning all the gifts that you've been given. However you manifest those gifts in your life, but that we're really here to help make the world a better place and to leave it better than we found it. And a just deep caring and compassion around what goes on in the world. And that we are all related. That was always really a part of my upbringing. So I was active early on when I was in high school around the anti-apartheid movement. And Bishop Tutu had just gotten the Nobel Peace Prize. And so we were all down in Washington, D.C. And there was a big rally. And then Peter, Paul, and Mary were all going to go get arrested. And I begged my dad. I said, "Please, I want to get arrested with you, Dad." And he jokes about it, and he says, his mom was a school teacher, for 30 years in New York City public schools, and so he was like, no, you can't miss 2 days of school. I mean, that was, much, but I begged him. Anyway, he let me get arrested with him. Yeah. And so that was the first time where this sense of civil disobedience and putting yourself on the line. That is very much a part of social change, and very much a part of what people are doing, right now in terms of massive civil disobedience all over the world right now.
Yeah.
But here in the United States, around the protests of immigration, the climate change, the kids, Extinction Rebellion, but country after country after country right now, people are starting to stand up and find a collective voice of power and say these systems no longer serve us and are destroying the planet, are destroying our cultures, are destroying what we have left that's good, and we need to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know you were very involved with the Youth and Indigenous Climate March that took place in New York in September of 2019. And in fact, that's how we met, which was beautiful, right around that time. And I know that you're also working with a number of Indigenous
Which was
communities.
the Fridays for Future March, because in September of 2014, was the big climate march and mobilization where there were 400,000 people in the streets. This one was September 20th.
Yeah.
And it was really led by the children, by the Fridays for Future Coalition, and many other, allied groups, 0 Hour, and then there are a lot of them. So that was when Greta Thunberg, came and helped lead that march. That's when we met.
That's right. That's when we met.
There are many key September climate marches in my world. So just keeping,
keeping the
being clear
sequence.
For everyone.
Yeah, well articulated. That's beautiful. And at around that same time, we had the opportunity to come together at Union Theological Seminary for a very special event related to water and healing. And this included, of course, the Center for Earth Ethics and the Eco-Peace Middle East leaders. Mm-hmm. And could you tell us a little about what happened there at that gathering, and why was that important?
Well, I kind of feel like at that gathering, many different lines came together for me personally. I've been a water activist and really have been standing behind the prayer of the water for about 10 years now. And of course I have my Jewish ancestry from my father's side, and I have my Irish, Swedish, Norwegian, German, Catholic, Lutheran ancestry from my mother's side. She's from Minnesota. And then it's the alliance work that I've been working on for a long time between Native and non-Native communities around reparations, social justice, environmental justice, climate issues. So Chief Perry was there, Dwayne Perry of the Ramapo Lenape Nation, which are the original people of New York City.
Yeah. So,
and I have been working with the Ramapo ever since 2016, when we formed a solidarity protest camp with Standing Rock at the time, and also to protest the AIM pipeline, the Algonquin pipeline, that was a gas pipeline that now passes right within 100 feet of the Indian Point nuclear power plant right outside of New York City. So just kind of protesting the insanity of what these pipelines are, the location, the extremely destructive nature of them. So it was all of these different people coming together, and there was water from the Jordan River that they had brought, and water from the Hudson River that was brought and mixed together, and a prayer was said. but the Jordan River, my dad wrote a song called The River of Jordan.
Yeah.
This mythical, biblical river of Jordan, these baptismal waters, these, waters of spirit. And I think a lot of people don't know that the Jordan River is now polluted and drying up, that the Sea of Galilee is now drying up, that the water is disappearing from the region, and what water is left in one of the driest areas of the world is contaminated and polluted. So in the ways that I've been taught, and in ways that I believe, water is really a living being, and it has a spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's a very powerful spirit of healing and of life, literally. Mm-hmm. We know we're made of water, our bodies are part of the water. The moon affects our bodies like it affects the tides of the water. We're very much a part of this living spirit of water. And so bringing these waters together, making a prayer for unity, making a prayer for coming together, making a prayer for our earth, of these different lines, Indigenous, earth-based lines, Jewish lines, Christ, based lines. For me, really, that's the key to healing right now.
Yeah.
My brother always says to me, we're the generation here to heal.
Oh, I love this.
And that is our role. So with all of the lines that are in me, and then all of the alliances that I've been working on for so long, this is our time not just to work side by side, but to really join hands, understand that we are all related, that we are all indigenous to this earth in some way, and to return to understanding, honoring, respecting, and restoring the earth, who is, the mother of us all, and the water who gives us life.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the context of that, the prayer, the song, and what was being done at Union Theological Seminary with the Center for Earth Ethics.
Yeah, it was such a magical, beautiful gathering ceremony, and then walking for I don't know how many blocks to get down to the Hudson River where the water was poured in from the Jordan that had been mixed into the ceremonial vessel. And I think as a treat for our audience, we'll probably be able to add at the end of our conversation here a few minutes of you singing, Bethany, at the ceremony. And I'll admit I was just holding the camera on my phone by hand, so it's a little shaky, but you'll get a sense of the audio and some of the beautiful echoes in the chapel where we were, and get hopefully a feel for some of the beauty and the love and the healing energy that was activated and enlivened there that day. And to have those folks from Eco-Peace Middle East, from Jordan, from Palestine, and from Israel all coming together was also just a tremendous moment and gesture of what we humans are capable of when we're leading with love.
Yeah, and the way that they work also, at least as I understand it, I know very little about Eco-Peace Middle East except for that gathering, but what they were talking about, which was very moving for me, was using the water as a bridge between cultures. So Jordanians, Israelis, Palestinians, all of them are all relying on this water. So how can we use this ecological necessity as a way of coming together? I mean, kind of like what I'm... we'll get to this, but as a segue,
I was just about to seg that way.
The work that we're doing up here, I mean, I am clearly, pretty far left in a lot of the ways that I think and conceive, pretty solidly not in line with the neoliberal, model, with our economic models. Not necessarily at all supportive of our governmental structures as they're, being revealed right now in terms of the corruption and the corporate reality. I just find it incredible incredibly destructive, the consumerism, the way, so much. And where I live here is in a very rural community.
Yes.
That is a very Republican, red, Trump supporting area. You know, people talk about the Deep South. This is kind of like a version of like the Deep North in that way. And I've never felt so hopeful here about building alliances, finding common ground, finding ways to talk, because most of the people up here are in the forests, are 100% understand the earth and have a deep respect for Mother Nature, have a deep respect for the spirits of the forest and the animals, you know. And it's not the people who are really from here, a lot of them have Mohawk ancestry. A lot of them, you know, they really are very much connected to the land and really want to preserve the wildlife, the water, the trees, the forests. It's not an exploitative mindset. So, I mean, I've found that there's, and there are a lot of farmers who really recognize that, you know, they look at what just happened in the Midwest to the farms there and the floods that are happening. They understand the seasons are changing, that the climate is changing, even at the same time as there's a lot of climate denial around causation, or, you know, the root causes, or there is definitely an understanding of this is happening. So how do we come together now with whatever tools we have to solve problems and to build community?
Yep.
I mean, that's where we are. And there's been an incredible amount of just welcoming, a lot of dialogue, a lot of let's roll up our sleeves and make this happen, and let's vision a different way of living together. You know, I think everyone up here really recognizes that government as it is not working. And we have many different reasons why we think that, and my reasons might be very different, you know, and solutions also might seem to be very different. But if you can come up with a really different vision of how to live together and protect the land, everybody's coming on board in a beautiful way that's not partisan and is really healing divides.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely beautiful. I've had the opportunity to spend several days here with you at this amazing place and home that you call the Waterfall House, which is perched on up above a waterfall. And
Yes,
there is some very special, beautiful water flowing right through here. And this is the place where the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project is launching now. And it's just an utter joy to see what's happening here and how you are sharing your gifts and resources to help this whole thing sprout and come alive right here in these ancestral lands of the Mohawk people. And I'm wondering if you might share a little with our audience about what Waterfall House means to you and symbolizes, and what's happening with the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project.
That's such a big question. Well, I'm for the most part born and raised in New York City. So I came up here about 20 years ago, and as much as I found the waterfall found me, you know. And in buying this land and this property and starting to caretake for this waterfall, my own life began to change. And there were many things in my life that changed around that time. But it was the first time that I really connected to the land and started caretaking, and there was something larger than myself that was at work. There's definitely a spirit here that you're as much in service to as anything else. So they call this waterfall, the original name of it is something like Ganawuragara or something like that. But even the Mohawks that I've spoken to it's like a bad translation from the 1700s of what the old Mohawk was. So there's been a bit of delving into what the meaning might be. And one of the meanings that one of the elders up from Akwesasne said is that it's like the one you can hear, the one that talks loudly. So you can definitely hear it from most places on the property, but it also talks very loudly to people and like gives people instructions. And I've seen people, you know, go through an incredible transformation because it's still a wild river and the forests are still wild. And so there's something of like returning to your human beingness that happens. And they say that trauma, or one of the definitions of trauma, are the places where of disconnection. You know, where you really disconnect. And I understand, especially in terms of the way that we live in the world right now, and the world is really a place designed right now for disconnection, for atomization, for, you know, walking around like this. We live in a space of disconnection for the most part. In America here, you know, many places of the world, the so-called, you know, civilized first world is also a place of this kind of trauma of disconnection from your roots, from the land, from family, and the way to heal trauma is through connection. And so I've just seen people go through these incredible processes of healing here. And one of the most profound processes of healing that I've seen is working with different Mohawk relatives as they come back to this land, which are their ancestral lands, where many of them have not been here. It's always been this story, you know, that they've heard of how things were before, the lands that were taken from us. And to come back to the land, to come back to the waterfall, to come back and be welcomed, and to feel again like the land is welcoming them back. There's an enormous amount of healing in that, and an acknowledgement that even the trauma happened, that there is an original wound all over Turtle Island, all over this continent, this country, that for so long has just been unacknowledged. You know, the whole campaign of Indigenous people, of Native Americans, of we are still here. You know, we are not your mascot. We are not a Halloween costume. This is not something that happened before. This is still happening. The destruction, the trail of tears, the decimation of culture. This is happening right now. It's happening. The, you know, uranium poisoning in the Black Hills, where they're doing uranium mining, and all over the reservations there are people with cancer, uranium. The life expectancy on Pine Ridge, an adult male, is 48 years old. Cancer, diabetes, all through the roof. Up in Akwesasne, Mohawk Reserve, it's the largest PCB dump in America. Cancer, diabetes, child cancer rates through the roof. The Ramapo Ford Motor Company dumped all their lead paint into their water supply. They've lost a third of their population in Ringwood. I mean, this is all still happening. It's like a different version of the smallpox blankets that are these, you know, gifts to the community, you know, of the legacy that us, the settlers, and our consumer ways and our mindset have been a disease that have really infected and destroyed communities, and continues to do that. So within the conversation of reparation and what is possible, and how can we envision a different future, you know, and also privilege and all of these things, you know, I look around at what I've lived my whole life, my education that I've had, you know, I really say, if I can't do this with everything I have here, then who is going to? If I'm not going to be the one to kind of stand up, make mistakes along the way, you know, really see what is possible in terms of making relations, helping to manifest a different community, helping to bring people together in this way, giving what I have, the excess that I don't need, that, you know, what is it to really live simply so that others can simply live? What is that? How do you actually live that motto? And that doesn't just mean, buying one less iPhone. And I was just actually at the Carter Center talking to people then, and it was donors, there are a lot of people who donate to the Carter Center and all the wonderful work that the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter's organization, is doing. And it was also on the eve of the Fridays for Future strikes, where all of the kids were standing up. And my daughter's one of the strikers as well. She's been striking since March. But I really said, the most selfish thing you can do right now, if you really want to protect your livelihoods, your children and your grandchildren, the most selfish thing you can do is to be generous. The most selfish thing you can do is to give everything you have. Because the only way we're going to protect our future is if we start sharing resources. You're just stupid if you don't. And you all are educated enough to know this. So it's not, we don't have a choice anymore. And I think it's really up to people to really say, how can we do this? It's really up to us. If not us, who? And if not now, then when? We're out of time. And I really believe that we are the people who are here now at this moment in transition. It's just us. There's nobody else coming. And we're at a pivotal time of change.
I love this. Well, it's just us and we're in it together.
That's all we got. It's just you and me and, and on all of our relations and all the people coming together. And it's not easy. It's not easy to forge a new way. It's not easy to manifest a new vision. It's not easy to have the humility and the courage to make mistakes also. And we're going to make mistakes. And then so how do you have the grace to, forgive and keep moving and be able to shift course and change and take the best. And so those are our challenges right now. And it's not, it's not an easy one. This is really, it's the survival of the planet, of the species, of everything we know and love. And I can also, because you had asked about the significance of the waterfall. So in 2013, I went to visit, they're known to the outside world as the Kogi. But they're really the 4 tribes of the Sierras in Colombia. The Kogi, Cancuamo, Wiwa, and Arhuaco are the 4 tribes. But the Kogi are kind of the most famous. So, and the Kogi are these priests. They were the 4 tribes were uncontacted, and they were uncontacted when the Incas came. They started to move up the mountains. So when the conquistadores came, they were already up, and they kept their original ways. So they live on top of the mountains in Colombia. In 1979, they started coming down from the mountains with a message that the little brother, as they describe all the non-native people, is little brother's destroying the earth and needs to stop. And the Kogis, they live in caves for 18 years. They're the guardians of the night. They never see the light of day. They're priests. They're high priests, not all of them, but they're the ones who are divined, who are going to be the priests. And they learn to see the world without ever having seen it. They learn to talk directly with the mother. And so it's kind of a training as seers. And they're really known by many people as like some of the spiritual heavyweights on the planet. They really have some real info. And they spoke to us when we went there about the importance of sacred sites. Was their main message at the time. And that sacred sites were more than just like a cultural curiosity of having respect or, for the things that people can think of as sacred or, it's kind of patronizing, oh, it's their sacred site. the ways that they explain this sacred sites and what sacred sites are is there are actually beings that live in these sacred sites, and that have been fed or activated with ceremonies of the original people over the millennia of existence. And just like a country has a government, the world also has spiritual governors. And these spiritual governors live at these sacred sites, and they communicate. And they kind of hold the spiritual fabric of the world together in their communication. But as the sacred sites are destroyed, and as the people who hold the ceremonies and the original people and their ways are assimilated and destroyed, there's no longer that same kind of communication isn't possible. And in the destruction of the sacred sites and of the peoples who hold them, the world has gone out of balance. And as we are made of earth, and as we are a mirror, we are earth, earth is us, we're all made of the same thing, we can't rebalance. Humans can't rebalance. We're all interdependent. So at this time of extreme change and the impossibility of the science, that we're looking at in terms of climate change and what's happening, they're actually saying we really need some divine intervention. We need some real help from the spiritual realm, and we need some help from the earth herself. And the only way that the earth herself can help is if we start protecting these sacred sites, restoring these sacred sites to the original people, so that the ceremonies can be performed, and so that they can be fed, and so that in nourishing the earth and helping rebalance, then we can be nourished and rebalance. Which is, one of the reasons, for example, that Mauna Kea, the whole Mauna Kea movement in Hawaii, where they're saying no more telescope, this one goes too far, it's too much, and you're destroying a pristine plateau, and it's just the mountain is saying no. Their information comes from the mountain. It's not anti-science, it's just too much. And science and spirituality and indigenous rights shouldn't be in conflict. There are many natives who believe very strongly in the science of climate change and the science of, there are two disciplines. There's like a technological science that Eastern European cultures have become very advanced. There's also a spiritual science that has been around for long time before Galileo ever looked into a telescope. So, and they're of equal importance. Part of the problem in our society is the devaluation of earth-based science, indigenous knowledge. Because that's some indigenous science. I mean, people know what they're talking about, and they have access to the places where we have been disconnected. And so part of Mauna Kea is to protect these sacred sites, to protect this communication, to protect these kind of acupuncture points of the earth, so that we can start to heal. And in all of the work that I've been doing over the past 10 years, 7 years with the Waterfall Unity Alliance, stopping pipelines here, all of this, we get into that. But there's definitely been just a just when you see people at the waterfall, when you see what happens, it's definitely a sacred site. I mean, everywhere's sacred. Every mountain, every tree, every forest, they're all sacred sites. Some places are, really overwhelm you with the energy and the power there. And so I've seen that happen. And so after I came down and was visiting with the tribes in the 4 tribes of the Sierras in Colombia, they came actually and visited here on their way to visit the Mohawks. And the Mohawks are known as the guardians of the Eastern Gate. So that's their place and the kind of point that they hold, that every tribe is kind of put on the part of the earth to guard a different point, like the Lakota, they have the heart of everything that is in the Black Hills, or in the Kogis are the heart of the world, and the guardians of night. And, there are all these different kind of guardian points. The Ramapo are the keepers of the pass, which was actually a pass that goes into the continent, and the Sweetwater protectors are there. So that everyone has kind of what they do, and the Mohawk are the people of the Flint, and this is Mohawk territory. And so it sensitized me and kind of made this a very urgent thing, where it wasn't no longer kind of on the back burner that to contact different Mohawk relations and start to really talk about what to do with this land, how to hold the energies here, what to do with a waterfall. Is there a way to return the waterfall to the Mohawk people, which how? So it opened up a whole series of questions for me. If these people, who are so respected, are saying one of the most important things we can do in terms of an activist place of helping to save humanity and life on Earth as we know it, is to return sacred sites to the original people. Again, if not me, then who? I've got this thing in my backyard that I've been living with for 20 years, that I have a very direct and personal connection and understanding of what a sacred site is, how it gets fed, how it gets honored, how it transforms people, and what the energies are. So if I can't find a way to share, to return, to caretake in partnership, then who is going to be able to do this? So that began a journey. That was 2013. So again, we're 7 years later, which led me to through different doorways, contacting people in Akwesasne, and then coming back down here and really praying, making prayers together, welcoming them back, doing certain ceremonies on the land, and really starting deep conversations about what to do with the land. And then in the middle of this whole story, the Constitution pipeline reared its ugly head. And the Constitution pipeline was a frack gas pipeline that they wanted to run from Pennsylvania through upper New York, with compressor stations along the way. And it had already been completely approved by the FERC, by the feds. It had already passed through several hurdles, but it was going to cross so many rivers, so many streams, so many aquifers, the possibilities of contamination, the reality that they were just starting to study of not just the fracking sites and the fracking wells and the contamination of the toluene and the benzene and the air quality and the nosebleeds and the brain lesions and all of the things that would happen to children and adults next to the fracking wells, but also the compressor stations had the same off-gassing effects. A huge release of methane and toxic chemicals. It creates acid rain, formaldehyde in the rivers, and and all we have up here is water. We are in upstate New York so blessed with abundance of water. And it's the aquifer for New York City, so all of these tens of millions of people, and all of the aquifers are all connected up here. They even did a study. They put, because they wanted to do some drilling for a quarry, a rock quarry up here, so they put some dyes in, and they showed how all of it is connected, and the dyes traveled all over Gilboa Dam, and it all connects up. It all goes to New York. So what do you do when there's a pipeline coming to your backyard? And there's a lot of accusations hurled again about NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is the time when NIMBY might make a lot of sense.
In my world, I've been wanting to take NIMBY back, because if it comes to your backyard, again, if you don't stand, who's going to stand?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hell no, not in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason the Lakota stood in Standing Rock
Mm-hmm.
was because it went through LaDonna's backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, not in my backyard. I have to stand for something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I made a film in South Africa
Mm-hmm.
under apartheid with these women, black women in the townships around Cape Town who lived and worked as nannies and maids and, you know, did that work and were very afraid to talk about activism and were never active until their next door neighbor was shot.
Yeah.
And they said, no, now we have to be active.
Yeah.
So what's happening to people now is it's coming to everybody's backyard.
Mm-hmm.
It's all our backyard. And when it comes to your backyard, you better stand up. And if everybody said, not hell no, not in my backyard, we'd be in a very different situation right now.
I love this.
So it was like me toca, you know, it was my turn, you know, to really stand. And this was pre-Standing Rock. This was 2015. And so I'd been doing this work with different Mohawks relations who'd been coming down. And all of a sudden now we had this shared vision of the return to the valley, although they were living 4 hours north. And the question is, okay, this is your ancestral land, but now your grandchildren's placenta is buried in the land. At what point is this your land now? Is it the unborn children's land? What are you standing to protect? Do you have a responsibility to protect this land now? You know, even though it's not where your physical home is. So where does responsibility, now what is your backyard? Is this now your backyard too? You know, where do we share that? And we had very real conversations, deep conversations about that, because it's no joke to start to form resistance and plan for resistance camps. And they decided that they would come down and they would stand. And I remember there was another pipeline, because once the Constitution pipeline was approved, there was another pipeline, because they tend to stack the pipeline, you know, pipeline route. So there was the northeast direct pipeline, the NED pipeline. So they were having an open house, you know, because they wanted to stack on top of the Constitution. And so they booked a local hotel, and we booked the Iroquois room in the local hotel and gave our own press conference. And the Mohawk came down and stood up and heard all of these people talking about eminent domain and how their property had been taken. And around here, you know, people are very libertarian. Eminent domain does not go over well.
Right.
And they stood up. Roger Jock stood up, and he said, I hear you. We know a lot about eminent domain. Now you know what it feels like. We've lived this. Again, now it's your backyard. Now this is happening to you. But we're here to stand with you, because we know what this is, and it's not right whenever it happens. And they pledged to really stand and fight. And so we were really preparing, again, pre-Standing Rock, to kind of build Standing Rock, a prayer camp in the path of the pipeline. And really inspired by the KXL, you know, can a teepee stop a pipeline? Can a prayer stop a pipeline? Can we do this with prayer? And with prayer in action. Praying is, you know, not turning your back, but really walking your prayer, grounding in your prayer, and moving from that place of really shared commitment. And but the prayer was not, and the goal was not to form a prayer camp to stop a pipeline. It was really that the pipeline never be built and to stop the pipeline, so that we didn't have to do that. Because I really did not want to spend a March winter in a teepee protesting it. That's was not what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so we really stood behind the prayer of the water and really made deep prayers to the water. And the one certificate that held up that pipeline was the water quality certificate, the 401 water quality certificate. Under the Clean Water Act, that the state of New York can determine, states can determine if something will have an impact on the water. They have the right to make decisions. And so at the last minute, and the pipeline, they were sure they were going to go through. They had already shipped the pipes to Albany, fabricated them, in Pennsylvania, which is, you know, frack me up, frack me down state. I mean, really destroyed the water of Pennsylvania in the shale fields. They had already clear cut maple syrup farm. These 200, 300-year-old trees, the Hollerens farm had already been clear cut with, you know, they came in with, you know, AK-47s and heavily armed to clear the people from the land, to cut down these trees in the middle of sap season, which of course for the Mohawk, that's the first medicine. Yeah. That's the first gift, or the gift of the trees. So when in April, New York stopped the pipeline and rejected the water quality certificate. I mean, didn't grant the water quality certificate. It was the first pipeline federally approved that had ever been stopped by a state.
Wow.
So it was a major victory, and it wasn't just our victory. There were many people working against the Constitution pipeline. But it was a huge victory, and really also showed the way of what can happen when the states stand up to the federal government. What can happen when people come together in this alliance. And so we kept, Cuomo banned fracking. He stopped many pipelines now. The Constitution pipeline was the first one with the water quality certificate. And that's one of the reasons that Trump is trying to undermine and take away the rights of the states under Clean Water Act.
This is where states' rights are so vital in protecting different regions. Let me just remind our audience that this is the Why on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series, and I'm sitting here in the Waterfall House with Bethany Yarrow in central New York, the Schoharie Valley of New York, the ancestral homelands of the Mohawk people, and we are discussing so many different aspects of the work that Bethany is doing here. And I want to be sure to give a quick shout out to the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project, and which is what's being launched here now, birthed. And folks can support Three Sisters by going to threesistersproject.org. And we'll also include our GoFundMe crowdfunding information in the show notes for folks, but you'll be able to get there from the website. And if you want to connect with Bethany through Facebook, you can go to Bethany Yarrow, find her that way. And we did mention early on the music, and to hear some of Bethany's music, you can go to bethanyandrufus.com. And of course, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors and supporters making this podcast series possible, as well as all of our community mobilization work that we're doing in places, communities all over. And this includes Patagonia, the Lidge Family Foundation, Purium, Beauty Counter, Waylay Waters, and Earth Coast Productions. A huge thanks to you all for your support. And of course, a major thanks to the many friends and folks out there who have joined our monthly giving program. If you haven't yet joined, you can go to whyonearth.org and click on the donate button and choose any amount that works for you to give on a monthly basis. And when you do that, I'll send you an email with a very special code to unlock all of the ebook and audiobook resources for free. So that's a small token of appreciation. You could share that code with friends and family if you would like. And I want to really encourage all of the Why on Earth community audience to check out the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project and to support that project as well. It is such important work that's happening here. It's important for this place and region, and it is symbolically critical, essential for our whole society. And we'll, over time, share more, I think, about why that is and what some of the backstory there is, because it's something I hope many thousands of us will come to understand very quickly. And I want to be sure to ask you, Bethany, about the 13 grandmothers and what is that all about as it relates to this work that you're doing here, and that you helped to make a film about them and about what they're up to.
Well, the Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers was formed in 2004. And it was called by a woman by the name of Jyoti, who had a vision that it was time for the grandmothers to speak and the grandmothers' wisdom to be heard. And so she contacted different people that she knew through relations. Most things are done through the doorway of relations. So it was just, who knows this person and that person. It was really just these Indigenous women, all holders of earth-based ways of prayer, who came together at Menla, which is the retreat center of Tibet House in Phoenicia, New York. Along with, I think Gloria Steinem was there, and Alice Walker was there, and Helena Norberg Hodge. There were just some really amazing human beings who were there to support. And at this gathering, there were 13 women who came, 13 grandmothers who came, and they formed the Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. And ended up traveling the world and really became a movement where they went to activate people to pray for the water, to listen to the voice of the grandmothers, to listen to the voice of women. You know, it was very much before Me Too, very much before, you know, the grandmothers at Standing Rock, very much before. It was really the beginning of this consciousness that it was time for the larger world to listen to the traditional wisdom of these women, of these Indigenous women, and that it was really the women, and it was time for the female voice and the female power to be lifted up in a different way, and to guide, really. And all of these women carried prophecies around 13 women, 13 grandmothers. There was one Alaskan grandmother, Yupik, who came with 13 stones that her grandmother had given her for the time when she would be meeting with the 13 grandmothers. You know, so it was all of these I mean, I was there filming as she was telling this story, and it was just, you know, things like this would happen with them, you know, and definitely when you start moving in these ways and with these kinds of women and these kinds of people, you're kind of moving, and your life is dictated all of a sudden by the principles of magic, you know, which is all around you. I mean, watching a flower bloom is magic in the right time. It's all magic. So things start to become part of a larger pattern, and prophecy is you're living inside of it, and it becomes a very real thing of so
that's a good feeling, huh?
That's a good well, it's a good feeling, but it takes, for someone again who didn't grow up in that, it takes a lot of release, a lot of trust, a lot of faith, and a lot of surrender, and a lot of shutting off your mind and your judgment, and recognizing certain things as true. I mean, Jyoti calls it, you know, the mind robbers come, and you start to overthink, and then you are doubting what you're experiencing because you just go, this can't be true, you know, this can't, but it's all happening. And so part of it is to really also live going on faith and really with surrender, which is what the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project has been, and what it's required on everybody's part. And so the work that I did with the grandmothers and the wisdom that I received from the grandmothers was really what opened the door to a larger understanding and ability to you know, have these kinds of dialogues and alliance building and opening and really understanding what it means to make relations, and what it is to be in service to a prayer that's larger than oneself. So it opened the doorway to all of these things, and it was through the 13 grandmothers and some of the people there that, you know, I met the Mohawks, and so it's all connected in that way. And so once we stopped the pipeline, so it wasn't the prayer and the goal of coming together was to stop the pipeline, but it wasn't just to stop the pipeline.
Right.
We were standing together to stop the pipeline so that we could protect this land together for the future generations, both Mohawk and non-Mohawk, which meant opening a doorway for the return of the people of the Flint, of the Yankahaga, which meant doing some very deep alliance work throughout the valley, you know, and really talking to local leaders, talking to local people, so that we can return to this place where there is original wound, where there is original trauma. And you study trauma, you know, there's a great intergenerational trauma is now a huge field of study in psychology, and there's a lot of studies around trauma. So if there's a wound that hasn't been acknowledged, if there is a trauma that's been hidden, if you're living inside of that, you're going to keep repeating that until you heal it. So on these lands, there is an original wound, and our country was birthed from that original wound. And we are living the consequences of that now. And in many, many ways. And it's not like it's just a nice thing to do to go back and say, I'm sorry, although it is a very good, nice, moral, ethical, important thing to do. But we need to heal. And so we need to acknowledge that that happened, acknowledge the wounds that happened, acknowledge the injustices, acknowledge that it still continues, and find solutions. So what can we do to repair? What does that actually look like? Reparations, repairing relations. And that is a gift not just to the Native people, but also to the non-Native people. There's a lot of shame that people feel. They can't even read the history, it's too painful. You know, I hear that from a lot of people. But that history is happening and happened. And it's really important to acknowledge it so that we can move beyond it and move to a new way of living together. So out of this work of the Waterfall Unity Alliance, Roger Jock's daughter, Gomeniosta Jock, who you interviewed, came down here, and nobody really knows what to expect. You know, there's a lot of pushback that the Mohawks have gotten, and they've had to really fight to reclaim land. And people come here and they just feel at home. I mean, I feel at home. They feel at home. There's a welcoming and an understanding, and so Gomeniosta brought 2 of her friends down, and this is a very living dream inside of the heart of the Ganyankahaga to return to these ancestral valleys, and to have an open door to be able to manifest that dream has been a huge, you know, joyful awakening of hope. You know, and again, you've spoken about this with the Three Sisters. So out of that, the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project was formed with the dream of establishing a longhouse right across the street, an educational longhouse. And the educational longhouse is right next door to the town governmental offices here. The town barn, the highway department, the justice, the records, they're all over there, the tax collector. And so they'll really be side by side, the longhouse and the town governmental structures. And when we went with Roger to present about, you know, we're going to do this and we're doing it next door, we're being good neighbors, we just like to let you know, they were so excited. They couldn't wait to dance in the longhouse. That was the opposite of what was expected of, you know, resistance. You know, it was like a relief. And people are looking for something to ground them again. There's so much disillusionment right now with religion, with the church, with, the molestation of little boys and girls, with with the ways that faith and people's deep spiritual understanding have been polluted by sex, power, corruption, and the trust has been abused. Whatever your religious, spiritual path is,
Right.
it happens in most of the world major religions. So this sense of returning to original ways, of returning to our connection to each other and to the earth and to God, in whatever that concept is for each and every one, I think is really a welcome relief for people. And so the response that we've gotten here has been incredibly enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And then the possibilities that it's open. So now different people are coming from Akwesasne and from there and here, different Mohawk folks connecting with the water again, with pure water and just the medicine of the water and releasing. There's just this sense of, it's extraordinary to watch it just now and watching Guniostas, her family and her partner and, just the healings that happen being on this land, and the possibilities that opens up. So, and with in the context of the climate crisis, sixth extinction, massive contamination of our water, pollinator die-off, crops and soil destruction. So there's no more mineral content in our food because we've destroyed the soil. So we have food, but we're starving to death. That kind of. So what are we going to do? What are the solutions we're going to build, and how are we going to do this? So, if you look at the drawdown plan,
right?
That Paul Hawken and the drawdown plan, they've come up with the top 100 solutions for drawing down carbon from the atmosphere, not just stopping our emissions, but what are we going to do to reverse it? And number 36, Indigenous land management.
Right.
Number 10, soil rebuilding and carbon sequestration in the soil. So how are we going to do this? So we have in this Schoharie Valley, which is the richest farmland east of the Mississippi, they say, and some of the best farmland in the world. If we can get environmental protections, if we can get indigenous stewardship of the land, if we can do soil rebuilding and carbon sequestration in the soil, if we can start to put together forest and water and wildlife preserves, bioregional preserves, so that we're actually protecting the different species, life on Earth, so that it can't be destroyed. We need certain places that are sanctuaries and then build out from there. So there's a large vision to the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project, but
it's beautiful.
It really has to do with reclaiming our sovereign, all of us, our sovereign right to be human beings on planet Earth.
It's absolutely beautiful, Bethany. And I am so struck that the tagline for Three Sisters is energy sovereignty, food sovereignty, cultural sovereignty. And it's something I think for each and every one of us to work on reclaiming as quickly as we can. And look, I know we could talk for hours on this, and we do.
We could talk for a few more. We do.
We do. And I know we got to sign off in just a minute or two for this episode, but I also know that one of the things many of our friends in the Y on Earth community are very excited about is the connection to what's happening here and what's happening with the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project, and to have an opportunity to check in from time to time and share videos and updates with folks as things get rolling through this winter and into the year 2020. And so I know this is a first of several conversations we'll be having. So I just want to thank you for all that you're doing, and to really honor and acknowledge the courage and the vision that you're holding and that you're cultivating with all of this. It's tremendous to witness, And I feel a deep gratitude knowing that you're here doing what you're doing here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all of your help, Aaron. You know, it's the answer, I think, for many of us, the answer to a prayer. And that we've all been making, holding, putting down, you know, somehow it's woven us all together. Yeah. And like I say, the principles of magic are still strong.
Yeah.
So there has been, you know, incredible coincidences that, oh my God, I can't believe that is really one of the phrases most often heard, you know, in making this happen. So, you know, sometimes you just keep holding and nurturing and holding and nurturing and building the soil. I mean, is really what I've been doing. Not the literal soil so much, but just the soil of human relations. Yes. And so that's really been the key. And now we've planted these seeds of sovereignty.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's from moon time to moon time. You know, it's they're being watered and they're growing, and it's going very quickly. You know, now that they've been planted, it's like, oh my God, now you're on a train that is, you know, you can't stop. Yeah. So may it continue, and, you know, continue in a really good way and in a protected way, and continue bringing good relations and good understanding and open communication and healing. And, you know.
And help. We need support and help for the project, for what's happening here.
Oh my God, we so need help.
It's really, really important that folks get this. And even if it's $5, that you can see, if it's 500, if it's 5,000, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But even whatever small gesture of gift you're able to make to support the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project, do it. Because this is such a strong symbolic statement of what's possible in our near future. And it sends ripples of vibrations through the land, through the water, through all of our cultural connections and relationships. So I really encourage everybody to get involved. And Bethany, but before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I guess there was a certain point, I've been doing a lot of protesting at the front lines, and at a certain point I got really tired. That can really wear you down. And not that I'm done protesting. I will be out on the front lines. But it's important to manifest solutions as well. And it's hard to be in a state of mind of protest and then also building solutions. There's just not enough time all the time. And so, I mean, my deep gratitude to all the protectors who continue on the front line, so many places, and stopping all of these projects. And then there's a time to really take stock and to say, okay, now what can I build for solutions? How are we going to get through this? Because that is a big question mark. So, and to follow up on what you said, in order to kind of clear the path and cut the way and manifesting solutions, it does take resources. It takes physical resources, spiritual resources, and definitely takes financial resources. So we're really at the prototype stage of what these communities can look like, and these collaborative communities could look like. And so it really will take many people's support and financial contributions. This can't be done without a collective effort. And there's you know, it's very true that the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land. And the land is something that is communally held. So if we can communally hold this land, and it's a larger project of the Three Sisters Sovereignty Project to start buying up land, start buying up farms, start buying up and restoring the soil so that we have food security, to start buying up the water so that Nestle can't come in and start buying up all of this unbelievable spring water that's up here. So this is really resources and a vision for everybody, and these are resources to be shared. So your support is not just a support for the Three Sisters. This is a support of food security, of water security, of the creatures for all of the children and all of the unborn. So we really need that kind of collective understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mindset we're moving towards.
Yep.
And so we're really doing this for everybody, and we hope everybody, in whatever way you can be a part of it, this actually does belong to you, right? Beautiful. This is something we really share, and we are in that way all related. We are all a part of the solution, and we can all be a part of the solution. So just jump in.
Jump in.
Because we're all here to do it together. So thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Bethany.
Thanks.
The Y on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series is hosted by Aaron William Perry, author, thought leader, and executive consultant. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. To sign up as a daily, weekly, or monthly supporter, please visit yonearth.org/support. Support packages start at just $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. You can get discounts on their products and services using the code YONEARTH, all one word with a Y. These sponsors are listed on the yonearth.org/support page. If you found this particular podcast episode especially insightful, informative, or inspiring, please pass it on and share it with a friend whom you think will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being a part of the Y on Earth community.